hiring practices of all major sports, and certainly when it comes to diversity and equity. And I'm wondering what, you've been about this for quite some time. I just want to give you the floor on that subject matter. To start off.
It's something that I guess, strived or to get to.
Mm-hmm.
I feel fortunate that I was able to understand what's going on or the difficulty of it. I was not immune to it. I was denied owning a baseball team and never really had an offer or opportunity to be an executive with a baseball team. I should interject that a couple of years ago, Jim Crane did offer me the presidency of the Astros.
Mm-hmm.
Really, Whitney was pushing Jim, his wife. Mm-hmm. You should hire Reggie. And I wanted to, but I figured, gosh, I'm in my 70s. Maybe it's too much for me.
Mm-hmm.
So I became a special advisor, and I really have regretted that I didn't do it just for the minority community, just to represent that, yes. Hey, there's a president of a sports team, it's Reggie Jackson, and he's one of us, for other young minorities to strive and see that you could get there. Now, we're also in the same position with our general manager. He's the only black general manager in the major leagues. And so it is, again, something that I'm proud to be part of and associated with. And we interviewed 6 people, 4 were black. We chose our general manager because he'd been leapfrogged twice. He had instructed or taught a couple fellows that worked for him mm-hmm. that were 20 years younger than him, but got jobs as GMs, and they passed over him. So it was something that our owner was supportive of, made sure that it happened. And so, as you say, I've taken a significant interest in it because of things that have happened to me and things that have happened to so many of our minority people. And as I discuss minority and diversity and equity involvement, you include women, you include LGBTQ, and all of there are 60 some odd genders. Mm-hmm. So you include all genders when you talk about hiring genders. We do have a woman general manager in Major League Baseball, which is pretty cool. And as I was coming in today, I was making note about what's going on in diversity, that baseball has been improving, but not quite enough. The minorities that are on the rise, of course, are the Latin American, mm-hmm. Because of the baseball population, if you will. But and there are now about 25 or 30 women that are working in the minor leagues. These are as either coaches
in the pipeline.
And
then how that eventually will. In theory, bubble to the actual major league surface.
Get there.
And I know you're working with Reggie Jackson, Baseball Hall of Famer, here on the Rich Eisen Show. I know you're working with Richard Lapchick, the director of the Institute for Diversity and Ethics in Sports, and the president of the Institute for Sport and Social Justice. And he's been listening in on this conversation.
Spectacular guy. I've known that name for a very, very long time. His father is Joe Lapchick.
Yes.
And his dad brought
Sweetwater Clifton, right?
First African American to play in the NBA, Sweetwater Clifton, and at a very, very young age, I don't know if there's a picture of Richard around.
Yes.
But at a very young age, when his dad brought Sweetwater Clifton into the league, he was hung in effigy at his home. And his son was watching that. Richard was watching that at a very young age. And Richard, as you come on, mm-hmm. Explain that in a little bit of detail, please, because it's a story that's important.
Obviously, first of all, happy to be with both of you. It was obviously a traumatic experience for a 5-year-old boy to see that.
Wow.
Once I saw that it was my dad that had his name written on the figure, the figure,
Mm-hmm.
and I would pick up hate calls directed at him for the next couple of years. My dad not knowing I was listening on the extension, and all I could tell is that a lot of people hated my best friend, and it was, as Reggie said, many years later I would realize it was because he had signed Sweetwater Clifton is the first black player in the history of the NBA, a league that's now 80% black. That in 1950 there were a lot of people that didn't seem ready for that to happen.
So as Reggie and I are sitting here, Reggie Jackson here on the Rich Eisen Show, and the director of the Institute for Diversity and Ethics in Sports, Richard Lapchick, here on the phone. Richard, I guess what would you say is the barrier that so many people of color keep running into when it comes to being hired at the highest levels of management in North American major sports?
Well, Rich, we've been monitoring this since literally the late 1980s, and various leagues have put in various policies in place to try and modify who gets hired in terms of increasing the opportunities, particularly for people of color. I went with Johnny Cochran and Cyrus Murray in 2002 to the NFL to threaten legal action if they didn't change their policy, and that's when the Rooney Rule was established, which worked really well for a while, but hasn't. And sometime Bud Selig had actually put that rule in place in baseball before the Rooney Rule. But I think the bottom line, and what I'm encouraged, I'm not sure if it came up in the early part of the discussion, is that Reggie, I believe, is going to have the opportunity to speak to the owners, because that's where the decisions are finally made that stop the progress. I mean, you can put all the policies in the world in place, but if the owners don't want to bring about that type of change, then they can be the blockage. And I think one of the things that Reggie and I have talked about so often is that when I started getting involved myself 50 years ago, we used to call diversity a moral imperative. Now I think everybody realizes it's also a business imperative. It's good for business to have a diverse staff working for you, because you're serving a diverse audience in different markets around the country and around the globe. And, you know, the compelling kind of change of the body politic after the murder of George Floyd was to look more deeply at the causes of systemic racism, and you know, this is one of them, and the wealth that's represented by the owners is something that, if they can be spoken to and influenced, as I hope Reggie will be able to do, and I'm convinced he will, then they can understand that this is, you know, not just about making this a more inclusive world, but making it a more inclusive world that's going to make the world itself better.
You know, as you know, Richard states, Rich.
Yes.
The important thing is if you get
and
more
I think,
people,
we're about to release the Major League Baseball report card next week.
Oh.
And you know, it's still you know, a very obviously one owner of color appointed in 2000, or bought the team in 2003. Nobody's bought a Major League Baseball team as a majority owner for the next 20 years. We're still hovering with, you know, a relatively small number of black head coaches and black general managers in the league. It's better in the league office, but as Reggie pointed out, that there's a lot of way to go to make that improvement, so that we can emphasize that business imperative as well as the inclusive part of it. That, you know, all around, whatever way you look at this, it's a step forward to be more diverse and inclusive for your business as well as for your fan base.
it's very, very important to have the judgments be, is it on meritology?
Mm-hmm.
It is, rather than just, you know, the color of your skin, if you will.
The qualifications of a candidate.
Woman, men, you know, all different types. And so when you can talk about that, and I believe I need to talk about it, or that we need to address it,
Yes, Reggie.
to the owners. Because if you own a $2 billion franchise and that's on the lower end,
Yes.
you're running up to $4, $5, $6 billion.
Yeah.
It's going to be difficult for you to tell a person who to hire. At the same time, I think if you recognize that there's significant value here, which they're eventually looking for, is people to come to the ball games. And so if you see a woman that's a general manager, or a woman that's a president of a team, If you see an Amerasian or a Latinx or an African American, then that particular community recognizes it. At the same time, there are so many whites that recognize it as well. And there's so many people that when I got done doing my documentary, I have had more whites, and it should be that way if the population reacts to you in reference of what's going on with the demographic communities that we live in. It should be more white people, and it has been that way that have said, gosh, Reggie, I really enjoyed what you said and the differences that you had, the issues that you had when you were a baseball player. Thank you. And so that to me means I'm reaching everybody. So if we reach everyone and are doing the things and hiring the right people, putting the people in there on their merits, then you have people looking from different communities, and that whether they're African American community or whether it's a woman, you're going to attract that person as a fan and get them interested because you're showing that you care, you're concerned, and you understand what's going on socially.
So what do you say, and I got Richard Lapchick on the phone, and you can answer after Reggie does, Richard, if that's fine. What do you say to people who have the opposite point of view, though, Reggie? It's just like, why does everyone have to have a label? Why do we have to see things through race and through gender? Shouldn't somebody just get the job regardless of that? Why does diversity have to matter is essentially the question.
Because of what you said. If that person said what you said, you said, why shouldn't the person get the job on his merits?
Or hers.
Was in the paragraph of, well, why do you have to be recognized as white, black, Asian, Latinx, whatever? Well, you have to be because I can look and see how the decisions are being made. You don't have any Amerasians there. You don't have any women with you. Now, there's someone that's qualified, so that's why we have to at least make mention of it, because it's not happening with your actions. So you need to change them. Rich, I'm handing off to you. Richard.
Richard.
Richard, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, and I think a perfect example of where you have the right people in place as opposed to not having them happened just several years ago with the commissioners in both in the NFL and the NBA. When the Ray Rice story broke and he got a 2-game suspension after the video of his assault on his girlfriend, and then the public had a big outcry. There was only a 2-game suspension for something so terrible, and so he made it a 6-game suspension. And at that point, there were no senior women in leadership positions in the NFL league office to advise Roger Goodell on what to do and how he should handle it. And he had, during that year, finally hired 3 senior women as VPs to advise him, change the policy, and started to get it back on the right track with the NFL actually taking an offensive position against men's violence against women. But that could have happened right from the beginning and been great. In the NBA, on a Friday night, a tape leaked with the owner of the LA Clippers making racist remarks to his girlfriend.
Yes.
And by the next morning, Adam Silver said, I will hold a press conference on Tuesday and let you know what the NBA's intentions are here to tackle this terrible thing. And Adam had a whole office full of people who looked different from each other, men, women, blacks, Latinos, everybody that could possibly advise him on it. And when Adam came out and said, this man will never own a team in the NBA anymore, we're removing him as an owner, I never thought I would hear a commissioner say that. But Adam was saying that because that was the advice he was getting from that diverse group that worked with him. And that's why diversity is so important, is you get those different perspectives and then can make your best judgment. And in terms of who we hire specifically, I think both Reggie and I would say, you need to have a diverse pool of candidates in the room for every significant position. But in the end, if the person who was chosen looks like me and I'm a white guy instead of Reggie, who's black, then if that person was really chosen because he was the best, I think Reggie and I would both say that's the right person then. But you've got to have the best people in the room so you're choosing from the best to get the best.
There are so many people, Rich, if I can jump in ahead of you.
Yes, Reggie.
That come from different areas, different communities, and their thoughts are different. What's important to someone that lives in Compton is not the same as someone that lives in Beverly Hills or Harlem and Scarsdale.
Yes, sir.
The needs, the desires, what's important to them is very different. One group is concerned about clothing, food, and heat, and the other group is concerning about either extending something on the house or what the holiday is going to bring because they live in a much more comfortable life.
Catch the Rich Eisen Show every single day on the Roku channel, 12 to 3 Eastern, for free.